Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bible Quest. This is the Thursday edition. We're so glad you're able to join us on this Thursday evening. We're going to pick up where we left off last time with part 3 of our discussion on end times. But before we do that, let me say hi to the guys. Hey, Ken, how you doing? Kenny?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
All right. So you're recovering from that cold, all right?
Yeah, getting there.
So if we hear you sneezing or coughing, we'll understand.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, Carl, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see both of you here. I'm glad Ken's on the road to mending. So we are going to be talking about what people believe to be a text that deals with the end times, but I want to correct you already. I don't believe Mark 13 has anything to do with the end times.
Exactly.
So the way you said it is the way people look at it, and I'm hopeful that as people go through these texts with us, they'll see that is not at all what's going on here. But I appreciate you introing it that way.
But I didn't say Mark. I didn't say Mark. What was it? I didn't say Mark 13. I just used the term end times. Or did I say Mark 13?
You said end times, but where we're going to be isn't dealing with that. So,
and what we're finding is end time going on over there, right?
Can you hear him, Ken? I've lost him.
I lost him too. I thought it was my connection.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think it's Drew's.
Oh no. Hold on.
Yeah, I noticed you had a quizzical look on your face, and I could still see you pretty good, but he sounded like he was going into the Matrix. So.
Okay.
Yes, his picture went, and then he was getting choppy.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, we can see and hear you again.
I had to switch over to my hotspot because my internet connection for some reason. Okay, I don't know where. I'll edit that part out. But so basically, I did mention that we're going to talk about end times, but we're really not. We're really
not
talking about what is being said by Jesus in Mark 13, right, Carl?
Exactly. We're going to look at the context in Mark 13, which I think will clear up the question of whether we're speaking about the end time or not. Certainly, if you stay in the context of Mark 13, you're not going to get the end of the world. It's just not there. So just to get us back into our generic context, the first 4 verses of the chapter is really what sets up the conversation that Jesus has here. He comes out of the temple after a day of really having debates with the religious leadership. And as he's coming out, some of the disciples point out how beautiful the temple is. And Jesus sort of offhandedly says, you see this temple? Not going to be left anything here, not one stone on another. And so a bit later, 4 of them gathered to him, 4 of his apostles, on a private conversation and say, tell us what you're talking about. When is that going to happen? What's going to be the sign of this about to happen? And so they're asking about what he mentioned, the destruction of the temple. It was really shocking for them. So in the first 4 verses, we sort of get that set up, that it's 4 apostles that are having a private conversation with him.
Let me interrupt. I'm glad you used that term, not one stone left. When I posted the first part of this series, the title is Not One Stone Left, Unlocking a Misunderstood Prophecy. And that's it. It's a misunderstood prophecy. Part 2, I named, Are We Looking for the Wrong Signs?
Yeah.
This predicts the end. The end of what?
Right. The end of the temple. That's
Exactly.
the context.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing to me. The first thing Jesus tells them in verses 5 through 8 is, don't be led astray. Don't follow people that are bringing you false signs. He starts telling them what the signs won't be. And the thing that's amazing to me is all the things he mentions. And he says, these are just the beginning of birth pangs. It's the kind of stuff that's been going on since the garden, to tell the truth. That's when birth pangs came in as a result of sin. He says, this is just always happening. Wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes, famines, all these things have to happen. He said, but those aren't the signs. And so what do people do today? As soon as there's a war or a rumor of a war, that there's an earthquake or a famine,
that's the sign.
Bible's being fulfilled. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus said those aren't the signs. So we can dismiss those naysayers, those doomsdayers, as they don't know what the text says. Jesus told the apostles those aren't the signs. So after he started his private conversation with 4 apostles and then told them what not to look for, he's going, in the next text we're going to look at, today's lesson, we're going to look at him giving them a warning about what's going to happen to some of them. It's not going to be easy. These are going to be difficult times, but they have a job to do, and they've got to be focused so they can get their job done while all this is going on. That's what his next text is going to be about. So he still hasn't told them when the thing's going to be destroyed. He's going to tell them what to be doing while they're waiting for this moment to come. So on that note, let's read verses 9 through 13 of Mark chapter 13. I'm going to read from the English Standard Version here. I just want you to listen. Again, we're in the context of Jesus with 4 apostles. I think it's helpful if you imagine you're one of those 4 apostles. You just heard him say that the central part of your city and your religion, this historic temple, is going to be destroyed, and you're worried because that means Judaism is going to be gone. So what does that mean? As he begins to tell you things, imagine what you'd be thinking. I want to put a context on that real quick. When the Twin Towers fell in New York, Americans believed that would never happen. There was no way that was possible. And they were taken down because they were a symbol of the financial power of the United States. Together with them was supposed to go the Pentagon and the White House. The Pentagon got hit, the White House didn't. But those people knew they were going for ideological symbols of the power of the United States. This temple coming down, the Jews are going to recognize that they're losing something that symbolizes their nation and their people. It was their rallying point. It was where they came to God. And the Romans know that too. And so they're trying to destroy the Jewish nation by taking out Jerusalem and the temple. When that happens, it's going to be the end of things as the Jews know it. So to them, it is an end, but it's not the end of the world. But I want you to put yourself in their shoes. This is what they're feeling. That's why this is such a major moment. And now Jesus is going to tell them it's going to get worse before it gets better. So let's watch what he says in verses 9 through 13. Any comments before I get into the reading here about that? All right, 9 through 13 of Mark. But be on your guard, for they will deliver you over to councils, and you will be beaten in synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings for my sake to bear witness before them. And the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. And when they bring you to trial and deliver you over, do not be anxious beforehand what you are to say, but say whatever is given you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. And brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. All right, so there's a lot in this text that is misconstrued often. And I tell you, on a cursory reading, when you get to that last verse, the one who endures to the end will be saved, it sounds like we're talking about final judgment and final salvation. But that's not the context of the conversation, and it's not what they asked about. Within this context, there's something they need to be spared from. And he's going to talk about that more in a future study we're going to look at. But that's an important thing he's telling them. So I want you to notice he started the whole conversation saying, don't be led astray. And now he tells them in this section, be on your guard. In fact, this is a very private warning for these apostles. He's telling them about their situation, specifically them. You or your in a singular sense is used 10 times in this warning. He's not saying, let the nation of Israel beware or let the world beware. He's saying, you guys need to be watchful. You're asking me about this and it's going to get tough. You need to be watching. They were completely overwhelmed by this news. But Jesus says, don't worry about that. You've got something you need to do. It's interesting to me in Acts chapter 1, the same thing's going to happen. They get Jesus back after the resurrection and they spend some time talking about the kingdom. And in Acts 1, verses 6 through 8, they ask him, Lord, is it at this time you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And he says, don't you worry about that. Instead, you wait for the power that's coming on you from the Father, and you preach to all nations in my name. He's telling them, don't worry about what God has determined to do. You worry about what God has told you to do. And that's what he's doing here. He's been preparing them for 3 years to go preach the gospel. And now they're worried about this thing that's going to happen. But he says that's not a reason to stop preaching the gospel. When the world's in turmoil, the thing we most need is people preaching the gospel. So he's telling them to go preach. Don't worry about this moment that's going to come. Right now, you've got a job to do. That's where your focus needs to be. This is not out of the ordinary for God. Jeremiah struggled with the same thing, and it's interesting how parallel the situation was. Jeremiah was preaching to the nation of Israel that their temple was going to be destroyed and they should go with the Babylonians into captivity. And they called him a traitor for it. And over, he said, this is so hard. He got thrown into a dungeon, and God came to him and said, what, you can't stand with the foot soldiers? What are you going to do when the cavalry shows up? Get to work, Jeremiah. He was worried about the moment and how it was going to go. And God said, don't worry about that. You do what I've told you to do. Jesus does the same thing with the apostles here. You're worried about when the temple's coming down, and it's a major deal, but you've got to go preach. And while you're doing it, things are going to be tough. So
a lot of people make a big thing about that verse 11 too, where they'll take it upon themselves that the Holy Spirit's going to put words in my mouth when I'm standing before different people. He's not to me there, is he?
He's speaking to the apostles, and they did this very thing. We see it over in the book of Acts. Yeah. This is a promise made to all Jews or to all Christians. This is a promise made to the apostles. At least here in this context, it's made to the apostles. Right. And the point is, I need you to go do this work, but don't worry, I'm going to equip you for it. I'm preparing you beforehand so that when you go in to do the work, you'll be prepared. And he says, and these things that you're going to present before kings, it's really going to be new stuff. They don't know it yet. They haven't received the gospel in its fullness yet. It's only after his resurrection. But he's telling them, you're worried about so many things. Don't worry about it. God will guide you at the moment. I'm going to give you my spirit, which is really what he's been telling them. You need to wait until my spirit comes on you. So this is not a promise for everybody. Jesus has just come out of the physical temple, and he's telling them, don't worry about this physical temple. You go preach and prepare the spiritual temple. You go get people ready to serve God, and you serve God. He said it's going to be difficult. You're going to be turned into the councils. You're going to be beaten. But he's talking to them. People use these verses and try to create fear. Oh, the last days are going to be horrible. If you're a faithful Christian, oh, they're going to beat you. They're going to drag you before the councils. Jesus never said that about us. He said that about those apostles. And it would be their other apostle brethren. And we see that. You can't get through Acts chapter 5 without having seen all the apostles already imprisoned. And they're being beaten for their preaching, just like Jesus said. But it's not something that is a precursor to the end of the world. The end of the world, when we see those texts, he says it comes like a thief in the night. There's not time for people to be beating each other and turning each other in. It comes like a thief in the night. There's no warning. But he is going to give them a sign for this thing, because this thing has a date, and he can tell them when to be looking out for it. But that comes in a later text. So what we've seen is it's a private conversation. The first thing he said is don't be led astray. A lot of people are going to come trying to tell you this is it. This is the moment. And they're going to give you these signs. Those aren't the signs. And when you're out preaching, it's going to be tough, but I'm going to guide you and tell you what you need to say. And you present me before kings and before nations. You go do your work. The gospel needs to get out to every nation. That's the urgency. So that's all that's going on in verses 9 through 13. He's preparing them for how hard it's going to be, but that he's got them. He's going to help them through this. So after this, we're going to look at a much more difficult text that's much more misconstrued. This one already, I think, is pretty simple, but it's very misconstrued. The next text, I understand how people misconstrue it, but the worst thing you do is take it out of context. Keep the next text in context, and it all makes sense. So that'll be for another study. Comments or questions, guys, about this particular text today?
So why do you think people, it's almost like this section you just went over gets disregarded, or is it just ignorance? What? Because you would think that was very logical. And when you read that, you would think that would help us heading into this next section to understand that why would all of a sudden we change and now we're talking about end times, right? So right. What leads people, why do you think people take that out of context so badly?
There are two things in this text, I think, that are misunderstood. One is that the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. So if you're looking at this as something that's going on at the end of time, I've heard people say this. until the gospel reaches the last nation on earth. So we got to get it to Alaska, or we got to get it to Africa, we got to get it to wherever, got to get it to this last corner, because as soon as it gets there, then Jesus will come back. Well, the gospel's been preached to all nations already. Colossians chapter 1, in Paul's lifetime, he said it had been preached to heaven.
Colossians 1, 5 through 6.
Yeah. I don't think that's Jesus' point here. I think the point is, this mission you have is great. You've got to get out and get this thing to everybody. This phrase, all nations, is what he said in Matthew 28 and in Luke 24 and in Mark 16. It's just the directive of getting the gospel out. He's not saying it has to reach the very last nation. He's saying your job is preach the gospel to all nations. Go do that.
Yeah.
But people read this text and think it puts a timestamp on it. So it's one of the reasons they don't think it's talking about then, because surely it hadn't reached all nations by then. Well, it had. Paul says it had by around 55 or so when he's writing to the Colossians. And the other thing is, the one who endures till the end will be saved. He's telling them in context, don't give up. I know what's going to happen. In fact, I'm telling you what's going to happen. It's going to get bad. This doesn't mean you're not serving God. In fact, when you go before the kings and they're getting ready to beat you, God will tell you what to say. Say what he tells you, even if you get beaten for it. So in Acts 5, when they go before the councils and get beaten, they come out rejoicing that they were considered worthy of suffering for the name of Christ, because they spoke in the Spirit. It says right there that Peter spoke by the Spirit and revealed the gospel of Christ. That's what they were sent out to do. Yeah. So as the physical temple is waning, they're preaching a spiritual temple. They're preparing people to be living stones. That's how Peter will write about it in 1 Peter near the end of his life in the 60s. So it's amazing to think about this. But in the context, this all makes sense. You don't need to reach a context 2,000 years away to understand what's going on here. He's preparing them for a very hard work, but they need to get to work. They shouldn't be worried about what God's got planned. They should worry about their part of the plan. Preach the gospel to all nations.
I think this is a good place to pause.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot. We'll pick up in the next study at verse 14. But thank you guys for hearing this out. I'm prayerful that those who are listening will go back and listen to all of these in order, and you will see there's a context that is very consistent. And I believe the argument through the context is straightforward. It's when you pull things out of context and then try to prove text with other books that you're going to get in trouble in this section. This is harder stuff, but it's not impossible, and it's pretty straightforward in the context.
Wouldn't you say that it's harder stuff because of the misinformation that people say it means today? They want to make it more complicated. They sell books because of it. And it's got that,
I think
that mystical excitement, drama, science fiction type of atmosphere, the entertaining side of it, and it gets you riled up. I mean, that could have something to do with it as well.
The kind of language that Jesus is using here is apocalyptic language, and so it's strange to us. It's not strange to the Jews. They knew this type of speech and literature very well. But to us, it's so fantastical, and so it sells books. And if you're thinking, hey, I can't wait until I get to see these things happen, that would be kind of strange, because it's going to be really scary if that's what you're waiting for. But people are looking on the horizon for, when are these signs going to appear? And they've missed it. This is already over and done with. So Jesus is telling them, let's keep it in the context of this conversation with the apostles. And I think when we get to the end of Mark 13, you'll probably be relieved to realize how simple this text really is.
Amen. All right, let's pick up next time. And I want to thank you, Carl, for explaining this and bringing it out. It is simple. If anyone in our audience wants to have further conversation with us or give us your questions or comments, go to BibleQuest.org. Use the form on that page, or right here in the YouTube comment section where you're watching this. Go ahead and put your comments in there, and we'll respond. We want to hear from you. We'd like to hear from you, and we'll respond back. Thank you, guys. I look forward to the next session. You have a great rest of your evening.